Hello there and welcome to Saturdays with John. Today's exciting lesson will be how Exam 2 went. Let's see here. Contending perspectives. It actually went remarkably well. I was very worried and everyone took the test and got it in on time, and so thank goodness. All right, so that was one bullet dodged. The big problem, of course, as I suggested in my email, was the fact that, new hat, and it, are you supposed to, is it like cool to keep that sticker in? I don't think so. Anyway, the problem was, okay, so how am I going to grade it? So I thought, God, I hate to print them all out. That's going to take forever. And I thought, well, but how else are you going to do it? So I printed them all out, and in your class, printed the whole exam. It wasn't until after your class was graded that I realized, you idiot, you don't need to print out the non-hell questions because everyone's pretty much going to get 100 on those. And so I could just scan on the computer to look for mistakes, which is what I did for macro. But anyway, so I printed out your whole class's exams. Pardon me. And let's see, where's your class? Here it is. Nope, that's not it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, so like here's all the tests. So like on Felipe's, I printed it out. On the back, I wrote his last name, so I would not know whose test it was when I was grading it. So I printed them all out, wrote your last name in pencil on the back, and then started grading. So you know what? I think I just got up and left my key over there. Pardon me. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So then I went through and checked on the key, and I guess let's get the non-hell questions knocked out pretty quickly. So don't forget, as always, be sure to have the thing I emailed you. I emailed everybody what they had. Let's see here. I hope you don't mind, AJ, if I show your exam here, because you had a 29.25 out of 30. I printed off just I scanned just the hell section, so I'm going to be scanning basically non-hell stuff that was all exactly right. So how did AJ do on the non-hell? Well, I know I'm violating FERPA right now, but anyway, the police will not be able to arrest me because they're going to have to maintain social distancing. Anyway, AJ's got a -0 on the non-hell part. So if he has a 29.25 out of 30, he must have missed 0.75 on the hell question. That's how you're supposed to use that information. So anyway, that's what I did with that. Oh, and the grades were, let's see, I have these in the email right here. I emailed them to y'all. I know you can still hear my voice. I'm going to type in my password. Okay. 5 A's, 9 B's, and 10 C's. So no D's, no S. So I think it worked out pretty well. All right, so let's first knock out the, and I'm sorry, I never did finish what I was starting. Take your exam that I printed out for you and make sure you have it available to see if I made any mistakes in grading. Now, on the non-hell part, you don't have that back. So I'm going to go over this so that you can have a look. And I think there were only 3 people in class that missed anything on the non-hell section. So if you were one of those people, see which one you missed, and then watch here to see how I graded it. Here's the key. All right, let's see here. There is according to the offer, the financial crisis arose from what? There were those 4 things to say. The whole question was worth a point. I made each thing worth 0.25. Absolutely no one missed that. Let's see. Oh yeah, for a school of thought that emphasizes the virtues of the market. I don't know that anybody missed that. Here are all the characteristics of the post-Keynesian economic stuff, 0.75 each. I don't believe anyone missed any of that. D. I even went to all the trouble of making some notes for myself on how to grade this one, and you jerks didn't miss any of it. So what a waste of my time. So I don't think anybody missed D. Let's see. Critical flaw. Insufficient demand to generate employment for every willing worker. So poverty admits the ability to generate plenty. 1 point, half a point on each one of those little issues there. Transform doing well into a speculative investment boom. 1 point. Oh man, I don't remember who it was now. Well, I mean, because I grade without seeing the name, of course. So This only comes out at the very end, but I do remember somebody left off the second half on this. So they had the risk part, then they just totally left off the 1 point, and there's not much I can do about that. I took a point off. I think somebody missed something. Maybe this one here. They put down they put down a correct study question had I asked that study question. So anyway, they lost 2.25 there. And then on the very last one, what we got here? Not revenue constrained, can't run out, can't go broke. All right, so there you go. So okay, so that was pretty easy and straightforward. And as I said, everyone did extremely well. Now the Hell questions. And first of all, the way I graded the Hell questions was, let's see, I had the, pardon me again. I had the points split up between Hell and non-Hell as follows. There were 12 points of non-Hell, so for all intents and purposes, you just got 12 points. I mean, not just for that. I mean, you went and did the study questions, and so in exchange for having done the study questions, you could just block, copy, and paste them in. Then the 3 Hell questions were 5 points, 5 points, and 8 points. And what I decided to do was, on the 5-pointers, 1.75 each was the hellish part. Because remember I told you that I wasn't going to grade the Hell questions like I do regularly in class, where if you just tell me stuff I already knew, you're not going to get anything for that. You've got to have the clever part to get any points whatsoever. And I told you in my emails, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to give you some points for just being in the right area, even if you never got there. So what I jotted down for myself was 1.75 was hellish on 2A, 1.75 was hellish on 2B, and both of those were worth 5 points. Therefore, 3.25 was just, you got to be in the right area, and you'll get the 3.25. Now, not everyone was, all right? So, but that was the general idea. And then the very last one, part C, was worth 8 points, and I was taking off 2.5 as hellish and 5.5 as at least be discussing the right stuff, right? And so that added up to 3.5. That added up to 6 points. Is that right, John? Yeah. Here, you can see my notes here that I was trying to figure out how I wanted to do it. The next one is for International Monetary, for our class right there. And if you add up that column that says hellish, it adds up to 6, which remember, if you make a perfect score on the non-Hell stuff and screw up the Hell stuff as badly as you can possibly screw it up, you get a 24. Which is exactly a B, and that would be -6, and that's what that column adds up to, is -6. If you got, which way is my hand? I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is, okay. Well, it's too far away. I'll just go up here and look. Let's see. If you got all of these points right here, but missed all of the hellish parts, you still would have had a B. And honestly, quite honestly, it was actually easier than that, because as you know, you didn't have to remember the non-Hell questions. You could just block, copy, and paste them in. Okay, so let's see how this worked out in practice. Oh, I love this question, number 2, because it's relevant, because it's actually, I mean, sometimes I'll put something on there just to see if you can figure out the model, but it really doesn't have much of a connection to anything that happens in the real world, other than just figuring out how the logic of somebody's theory works, which is important in general. But this one's about a recurring theme among economic analysts is that Americans need to decide that they want to save more, because this would raise investment and therefore growth. And that's absolutely true. That does come up. Austrians and post-Keynesians would come down on very different sides of this argument. Now, I've asked this Hell question before, but I adjusted a number of things for the take-home version. First of all, I told you who would be in favor and who would be against it. On the non-take-home version, you had to figure that out. Who would have been in favor of it? Who would have been against it? I opened with 2A, for example. The Austrians would think it'd be a good idea for Americans to save more, because this would indeed lead to more investment. And then the next part says, please explain why they would say this, specifically in terms of their theories. And on a non-take-home version, where I would have been there to sort of talk to the class, that would have been it. But I added on this one, think especially about people freely wanting to suddenly increase saving versus consumption. This was mentioned specifically in an Austrian theory. All right, so let me get my pen here, my marker pen. So I was trying to give you enough hints there to where you could sort of nail down where it was coming from if you had studied, all right? If you were sufficiently familiar let me move the camera a little bit, sufficiently familiar with the material, you could come up with it. If you weren't, then, and you were, like let's say that there was some person that had not really bothered to do the study questions at all, had just had somebody else do them, and then they used theirs. Well, they would have been screwed on this, all right? Because they could block, copy, and paste in part one, but, am I there? Yeah. They could block, copy, and paste in part one, but they didn't really know what the stuff was about, so they wouldn't be able to come up with the answer to this. But, as you saw from the grades, people did pretty well, so that wasn't a major problem. All right. Shucks, you know what? Oh, it's right there. It's right there. I suddenly realized that I probably should have had with me the answers to all the study questions, because I suddenly realized I'd like to show you what study question this comes from, and I don't have it. It's sitting in here. Sorry. And now I do have it. All right, let's see here. Don't forget, all of the videos for the rest of the semester are already done and uploaded, so you can finish all your study questions. Let's see, here's Contending Perspectives, and let me show you the study question that I was sort of playing off of here with this Hell question. Post-Keynesian, Austrian. There's Marx. And I know you know which one it is. Well, actually, I don't know that. Because some people did get some things wrong. All right. Ta-da! The business cycle one. 57. That's what I was after. Now check this out. Assumptions. People would rather consume today than save for tomorrow. Banks earn income by loaning out people's savings. Banks can only convince people to save by offering interest, which they must raise if people become more reluctant. Oh my God! Let's go back to that exam question. Let's see here. Think especially about people freely wanting to increase saving versus consumption. All right, so that's exactly why I put that sentence in there. Think especially about people freely wanting to increase saving versus consumption. This was mentioned specifically in an Austrian theory we covered in class, which they must raise if people become more reluctant. All right? So if you remember the lecture on this, the whole thing was about the interest rate in Austrian economics is a very important signal to, let's see, I'm going to move this just a tad this way. Yeah. I might even sit down. Very important signal regarding how people in that society want resources used, right? And as a number of people pointed out in their Hell question answer, they said that, well, when people want to consume today, that means it's hard for banks to convince people to give up their cash so that banks can loan it out. And so as a consequence, interest rates go up, which means that firms don't invest as much, which is what consumers wanted. When they don't want to save, when they want to consume today, then interest rates go up and firms don't invest because interest rates are high. So this is exact opposite. Exact opposite. People freely want, people want to save, all right? Then that means that interest rates fall, all right? When people want to save, I got a glare on there. I bet it's this one. Yeah. When people want to save in that Austrian business cycle theory, then that means that the interest rate will fall. And then what happens? The investment goes up, all right? There's a light on that one too. Where the heck's that coming from? Well, now I've got all the lights up. All right, but I think that, well, let me try this one. If that does us any good. Yeah, it's not too bad. All right. So, in the Austrian model, when people want to save, This means that banks don't have to offer as much interest because people are willing to hang on to the cash. People are willing or not spend the cash, which means that they offer less interest. It means they charge firms lower interest. It means the investment goes up. Voila. Now we have the answer to that one. That, in fact, what I have here is, they would strongly agree. Well, of course they would, because I already said in the question they would, but that's a holdover from when this was a non-take-home exam. In their view, an increased desire to save would be reflected in lower interest rates. This would mean that firms would invest more and cause growth over the long run. Okay, so basically what I've got there is I have two things marked out there. Now, this whole question was worth 5 points. And then that leaves me with what? 3.25. Heavenly. All right, so the whole question was worth 5 points. I was going to make 1.75 of it hellish. If you couldn't figure out what I just said over here, then you weren't going to get that 1.75. Where did that 1.75 come from? A point here and 0.75 there. Now the other 3.25 was heavenly. So if you discussed the Austrian business cycle theory, where this would have been relevant, but you screwed it up. You screwed up this part right here. You got the 3.25 back. All right. If you ended up discussing something other than the Austrian business cycle theory, where this is the issue, then you didn't get the whole 3.25 back. Nobody lost 5 points. All right. So I always gave something. But basically, if you were going in the right direction but never got there, you got 3.25. All right. In other words, you got a minus 1.75. If you did worse than that, you not only didn't get to this, but you also took the wrong direction to get there. You didn't go via the Austrian business cycle, then you lost more. Now, what I did was, for every Hell question in both classes, is I read through all of them first, all right? And I read one, and I was like, oh, that really sucks. So I put it way on the far right. You believe you saw the photograph of my dining room table in the email I sent. Put that one way over there on the far right. Hey, this one nailed it exactly, way over here on the far left. And then I split them up like that. So I already had in mind the most I was going to take off, and that's what the ones way down here on the right got, and obviously the ones way on the far left got -0. So that's how I did that, all right? So once again, oh, and I should say, let's see, what were some of the wrong answers? I'm trying to think here. There were people that weren't starting with people want to save more. That's the whole, remember, let's go back to the very beginning of this question. A recurring theme among economic analysts is that Americans need to decide that they want to save more. All right. So this is a voluntary thing. It is what they wish to do. It is their own internal, all consistent with the Austrian subjectivism. They want to save more. And so, I don't know, I got a variety of different incorrect answers. And people were bringing up the government doing stuff, and it's like, well, no, that's not what this is about. I mean, I wasn't going to take off if you brought that up, but if that became the core of your response, if that became, well, if the government tried to do this, it's like, no, that's not what it says. What it says is, what if the private sector, what if people decided they wanted to do this, no government intervention whatsoever? So, have a look at your Hell question, see what you think, and if you have further questions, and I tried to write a few more comments than I usually do when I hand back tests in class, but as you know, in class, during normal non-COVID-19 semesters, I don't write a lot on the test, because I figure, hey, I'm going to go over it in class, and so, I'd rather get the test done and back to you so that you can have the test, that's what I did. All right, so I didn't write a lot, but I wrote probably a little bit more than I usually do. Okay, next one, part B. The post-Keynesians would strongly disagree, and once again, in a non-take-home exam, I would have not told you that. You would have had to work it out. Saying that higher rates of saving would most certainly not raise investment and would actually cause recession. Why would they argue this? Again, specifically in terms of their theories. Now, this is a part that I added for the take-home. recall that in one of their models, they, like the Austrians in Part A, specifically included agents' desire to spend, parentheses or not spend, income. The answer is there. I want to make sure you thought about that. You thought about specifically including agents' desire to spend their income. All right? Agents' desire to spend their income. Well, I'm glancing down here among my notes, and I believe I have found the answer. Here it is. Yep. Yep. C equals A plus B times Y. You know what the B is? How much of their income they want to spend. Now, some people pointed out S equals Y minus C. Oh, absolutely. But where did the C come from? The C there is determining S, right? I mean, there's your income. How much of it are you going to spend? Well, the C. Where did the C come from? A, which was an irrelevant intercept that we talked about in class, and B. B is the percentage of your income you spend, all right? So there it is right there. That what you need to say is, let me erase this, same situation right here. It's worth 5 points, so same setup over there. Then, let's see, where's my key? Here it is. Increased desire to save would, would show up in B. Is that what I've got here? Yeah. As fall in B, which lowers the multiplier. A lower multiplier leads to a fall in Y. All right, so I got the points split up like this. All right. So, is that right, John? Yeah, that's right. That, first of all, you had to figure out that, oh yeah, sure enough, there is a place where they specifically included the agent's desire to spend, and I put it like that. I didn't say desire to save because I wanted to get a better hint to you. Their desire to spend, aha, that's B. Oh, I don't even have it up here. I don't need to, but for the showing you what the answer was, but Y equal, well, let's just do C. C equals A plus B times Y. There's the desire to spend. There's how much money they're going to spend, right? If they desire to spend less, i.e. to save more, then B is going to fall. What's going to lower the multiplier? And if the multiplier goes down, I guess just I, yeah. In international monetary, I'm sorry, in intermediate monetary, macro, we had a lot more crap on there. A plus I. So if B is lower, this is smaller, and Y is smaller. All right, so that's what I was after. Let me go back to the post-Keynesian would strongly disagree, saying that higher rates of saving would most certainly not raise investment and would actually cause recession. All right, and so we have it falling down here. I think in practice, actually, what I tended to do was, because I wasn't going to, if you said it was going to lower the multiplier, I didn't need you to say this part right here. All right, so if you got, so this part ended up being like +1, and this part down here plus 0.75. So anyway, have a look and see if I screwed that up on yours. Now, once again, if you got in the right direction, but you didn't get there, depending on how much you got in the right direction, that was worth 3.25. And I never took off 5 on anybody's. Everybody got at least a couple points, even if they said the most ridiculous thing. And there were some really short answers. Whether somebody was strapped for time or they just hadn't studied it very well, I don't know. But even those didn't get everything taken off. By the way, have you seen these? TCU Economics. Yeah. We had those made up a couple years ago, so very nice. Now, let's see. And I'm trying to think of some incorrect answers. There were a number that said, that really investment is what drives the GDP. Yeah, okay, that's right. But that's not getting at what the question is asking, and that is, what if people decided to spend a lower percentage of income? All right, that's the issue. What if they did? And so you're right that this isn't somewhere where the post-Keynesians would focus. They would focus on investment. But the question was about, there is a place in here for it. And this is a very relevant issue. Oh, Americans need to save more. This would say, actually, if Americans save more, we'd be in worse shape. And that what we really want for an increased amount of savings, if not rate of savings, is for investment to rise. Which is true, but it doesn't get to the answer. Okay, so that was B. Let's see. C. Oh, man. I was excited about the answers on C. At least on the first half. They didn't always get through to the second half on this one. But almost everybody got the first part of this one right. I was very pleased about that. Now, as far as the corresponding hellish heavenly breakdown here, it was worth 8 points altogether. And what did I tell you I did here? 2.5 and 5.5. Okay, so 2.5 was for figuring out the hellish part, and 5.5 was for discussing the correct issues, right? Which again, I laid all the exams out, and I did with 2B as well. I didn't mention it, but I laid them all out, and okay, that one really isn't anywhere near even the right ballpark, and this one on the far left is exactly right. Now, here's the deal. All right, and I was kind of proud of myself on this one, because you didn't have to turn in a graph, but you had to know how to use the graph, all right? And so that way I was able to ask questions on the graph. Did the same thing in intermediate macro. I asked questions about graphs, but only asked for the responses and not for the graphs themselves. All right, draw a classical labor market diagram starting at full employment. Here, let's do that real quick. NW. I was tempted to add a bit onto this question, and then I talked myself out of it, which I was glad of later, because people were done with the exam, several people within an hour, and that was very good. I was glad to see that, because I wanted to make sure that you had plenty of time to do this. Let's see. Let me go ahead and do our point of equilibrium. W sub 0, N sub 0. And then I said we're going to have a real flat NS curve. And by the way, that was a last minute thing. At the last minute, on that morning of the test, I thought, why am I just describing the graph? Why don't I just draw it? So at the last minute, I drew that graph you had on your exam and put it on there, because I didn't want somebody to miss the question just because they misunderstood my directions on how to draw it. So that's why you had the graph on there, was because of a last-second decision that very morning. Very flat NS and a very steep NS, all right? And so it says, all right, start at full employment at W sub 0, N sub 0. Do the labor demand curve as you usually do, but draw two possible labor supply curves, both passing through N sub 0, W sub 0. One relatively steep and one relatively flat, all right? You should now have three curves all passing through the same point, all right? Imagine that the ND curve shifts left. Compare what happens. This causing some temporary involuntary unemployment that eventually leads to a movement to a new equilibrium. Compare what happens on the 2 and S curves. All right. We'll call it N1 and W sub 1 and N2 and W sub 2. All right. Which one had the biggest fall in wages? Aha! We're about up to a part that was worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5. Hang on, I'm counting out the points. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. The biggest fall in wages was the steep one. And the biggest fall in employment was the flat one. Almost everybody got that. Thank goodness, almost everybody got that. So I was really happy about that. There were like 2 people got exactly the opposite, and I'm very sorry about that. I wish you hadn't, but they did. So anyway, that was a shame. Now, let's see here. Then on the next part, it says why. All right. Last, explain why this occurred, but specifically in terms of the underlying economic behavior. For example, quote, and I just made something up real quick. Interest rates fell more on the flat curve because firms didn't care, so banks had to entice them by dropping rates even further. And I said, my answer obviously has nothing to do with a specific question, but just giving a general idea. All right, so why? Why on the steep curve do wages fall so much? Well, it's all, and a number of people got it. It's all about understanding what elasticity means. This curve right here, do workers care a lot or very little about what wages are? Well, think about it. If it were vertical, they don't give a crap at all what wages are. They'll work at any wage. In Sub-Zero, people work at any wage. So when it's really steep, they don't really care about wages. So now think about this. When people were thrown, here, let me mark the equilibrium. I'm sorry, the unemployment. On the green curve, the unemployment that, no, I don't think I want to do it that way. Where's my eraser? Because actually, it's going to get too messy. I'm going to put all those on there. All right. Yeah, no, I can do that. I could do that. Yeah, okay. In fact, let's do it this way. Let's do it blue, because I don't want to make it specific to either curve. All right. The immediate impact of the leftward shift was unemployment, involuntary unemployment. How much? That much. Now, that means that these people are now in competition for work, right? These are the involuntarily unemployed people that are now in competition with all these folks over here, the total workforce. They're all competing for jobs. Remember what the classical version says, and it says that they will be willing to work for less in order to get a job. How much less? How much less are you willing to work for? Well, heck, a lot less. All right, well, that's why wages fell so much. These folks are willing to work for a lot less, and that's why wages fell so drastically right here. But it's also why unemployment why employment eventually settled very close to N sub-zero. They were willing to work for whatever they could get. So wages fell a lot because firms were willing. People were not leaving the workforce just because wages were falling. A few did, but most of them stayed in the labor force, and so wages fell a lot, but employment did not. Meanwhile, over here, well, screw that. If that's all you're going to pay, I don't even want to work anymore. So many people simply left the workforce from here to here because they weren't willing to work at this lower wages. So the firms couldn't lower wages as much and still attract the workers they wanted because a lot more workers left the labor market. So what we've got then is the saying which one shifted, saying which one, let's see, I'll mark it here. Which one had the bigger fall in wages and which one had the bigger fall in employment? And that's going to be, and I've got it marked down here wrong, which is worrying me. I need to go back and double check the test, which I'll do here in a minute. But anyway, that's 1 point. All right? Because remember I said it was worth 2.5 of it was hellish. And then, whoops, kneeling on my microphone cord. Is it okay? Yeah. All right. Then the next one was why in terms of behavior, and that's the other 1.5. All right, so because 2.5 was hellish, and so of that, 1 was steep and flat, and 1.5 was why in terms of that behavior. I may have graded that wrong, so I'm going to go back through all those and double check. Don't get too hopeful yet. In fact, I won't even send this video until I know for sure, and I've already changed the grades. But I'm thinking I was taking off more for these than I had originally intended to. So I will double check all that because they're all laying right there. It won't take but a second. Anyway, I guess that's it. So have a look and see if and again, in terms of the heavenly part. And almost everybody got, as I said, got this part. But you need to be talking about elasticities, about labor markets, and about the specific issues involved in order to get all of the 5.5. All right. Again, I laid them out. and depending on how far off they were. So that's it. So I guess we'll do the final like this too, because it seemed to work pretty well. And don't forget that all your videos are online. 34 minutes. I told Melanie it might take me about a half an hour. And I was close. I was very close. Yeah, that's it. Let me know if you have questions on how I graded your exam, because you've got the scan of where I graded your test, and you can send it back with specific questions. I didn't show you what I took off on the non-Hell, those few of you that missed something. I'm assuming that you can tell pretty quickly, but if you can't tell, just let me know and I'll check it for you. Thank you.